What was your best, you're speaking to the manager right now, moment? So I own the building where the company I'm a part owner operates. It's located in a nice office park with about a dozen other office buildings that are about the same size as ours. And we have a dumpster that gets emptied twice a week. It sits behind and to the side of our building, and there's a nice fence around it. Because of where it's placed, it's close to the parking lot of another building in the office park. I was in the process of removing old carpet from my house, and each night I would stop by my workplace to throw some of it away. Since we weren't running production that week, the dumpster was empty, so I figured it was a good time to use it. On the third and final night, where the trash was scheduled to be picked up the next day, I noticed a guy by his car in the parking lot of the other office building. As I was getting ready to leave, a car came speeding up the side driveway, turned on its bright lights, and someone yelled at me to stay where I was. I stopped, and it turned out to be the same guy who had been in the parking lot. He started yelling at me, saying he was calling the police because he saw me dumping trash into the dumpster. I asked him why he cared, and he said he was on special patrol for the company I'm part owner of, and that I was in violation and needed to stay there until the police arrived. I asked him who he had talked to, and he said, I don't know his last name, but his name is Fred. The problem was we had never had anyone named Fred working there. He was blocking my exit, and I started hearing a siren in the distance. The guy said something like, Here they come now, you're in trouble. So I just waited there for another minute. County sheriff's car pulled up with his lights flashing, and the officer got out and walked over. Then he said, Hey Mike, what's going on? I replied, Hey Andy, I'm not sure, but this guy is trespassing on my property. The guy's face turned completely white at that point. I didn't press charges, even if it was possible, and I didn't see the guy around again after that incident. I'm not sure if he was confused, had emotional challenges, or just had a short temper. Officer Andy did take the guy's information, probably more to scare him than anything else. And it was in that moment Mr. Angry Sidewalk Patrol lost his marbles when he heard this guy and the officer talk to each other on a first-name basis. Yikes. Story 2. I used to be a department supervisor at a library, which meant I was the third highest person in the organization according to our chart. When my manager wasn't around, I was in charge of the whole building. One day, a lady came into our department upset about some policy. I can't remember exactly what it was, but she was acting like an entitled suburban mom who was angry that we wouldn't change the rules just for her. After I explained that we couldn't do what she wanted, she demanded to speak to my supervisor. I smiled and told her that was fine. I turned around as if I was going to get someone, but instead I did a full twirl and held out my hand to her. She looked at me like I was crazy, and I introduced myself as the supervisor she wanted to talk to. The lady didn't like that and stormed off to the front desk. A few minutes later, one of the workers from the front desk brought her back to me. The worker explained that the lady had a problem and wanted to speak to the person in charge, which was me since my boss was out that day. The look on her face when the front desk worker brought her into the office to talk to the person in charge and saw me sitting there with a big grin was priceless. I explained to her, again, that we wouldn't be changing our policy just for her. I wished her a nice day, and that was that. It was the only time I've ever been able to do something like that, but it was really fun. Story 3. I had a job as a resident director, which meant I was the boss of a building at my university. Even though I am old enough, I looked like I had just graduated from high school. It was move-in day for all the freshmen, and everything was going as usual. There were parents and students crying, people trying to bring in things that weren't allowed, and it was just generally a hectic day, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then a mom with that typical, I want to speak to the manager, body language and haircut even, approached one of my staff members. She started demanding a different room for her child, yelling and insulting my staff, and eventually screaming for a manager. I walked over, introduced myself, and asked her to explain what was happening. The mom couldn't believe her eyes. She couldn't accept that I, a young man, was the manager. She insisted on speaking to the real manager, so I took out my wallet, gave her my business card with my name and title clearly printed on it, and told her that I was indeed the real manager. She kept complaining and arguing until she finally ran out of energy. Hours later, there was a knock on my door, and it was the mom. She apologized for her behavior and explained that it was really stressful to move her child away from home. She admitted that her emotions got the best of her and thanked me for treating her with respect, even though she hadn't shown me the same respect. Well, it is nice to see somebody realize that they were mean when they have a moment to cool down and then put down their pride and apologize, but it wasn't really all that necessary. I mean, to lose her cool. Story 4. I used to be the manager of a shop, and we often had difficult customers coming in. A lot of them were just looking for the cheapest deals, not the best products. One day, a guy came into the shop looking for a new tank for his device. I showed him our three most popular tanks, but he complained that they were too expensive. Then he pointed to a tank on our discount wall. This tank was an old model from the first generation, and it was about 4 years old. I was honest with him and said, yes, that tank is cheaper, but I gotta tell you, it's not a very good tank. It's one of the first ones that came out, and it's not great. Even though I warned him, he insisted on buying it, so I sold it to him, but I made sure to tell him, just so you know, we don't allow returns on tanks, so if you don't like it, we can't take it back. 3 days later, he comes back to the shop complaining loudly that I had sold him a bad tank. I said, yes, I did warn you that it wasn't a good tank, and you still chose to buy it even though I told you it wasn't great. I also told you that we wouldn't take it back. He made a big scene and demanded to speak to the manager. This was after he had insulted me and used bad language several times. I smiled and said, okay, and went back to the office. Then I came back out and asked, did you need to speak to a manager? He was really angry and yelled, give me a different manager. I calmly replied, I'm the only manager here. Please leave my store. You're not welcome here anymore. There were other managers, like a district manager and a regional manager, but I had the authority to handle situations like this on my own, and they would have been upset if I had bothered them with this problem. The guy threatened, you haven't seen the last of me. I responded, that's okay. The police station is just down the street, about 400 yards away. If I do see you here again, I'll call them. He stormed out angrily, never came back. I felt a bit sorry for him, but I had clearly told him not to buy that tank. He insisted because he was looking for a cheap deal, not a good product. Story 5. I run a support service for people who don't have a lawyer. Most of my clients are really grateful and brave. They have to deal with very tough legal problems by themselves, and I respect each of them for the hard things they have to go through. Our service has limits, though. We can't give legal advice, which is important later in the story. But there are some people who expect the world to do whatever they want, no matter what. I had one client who wanted the court to give her a ride to her hearing, which was over 100 miles away. I knew this was impossible, but I still tried my best to talk to the right people to see if it could happen. After checking, I told her that the court couldn't do that for her, and I couldn't make it happen because I don't work for the court. Also, I couldn't answer her questions because she was asking for legal advice, which I couldn't provide. She got more and more upset and accused me of stopping justice for her and discriminating against her. I stayed calm and tried to explain that she was asking me to do things I just couldn't do. Things got tense when I had to be firm and tell her that there was nothing more I could do for her, and I needed to hang up the phone to take care of other tasks. She went quiet for a moment, and then in a sharp tone, she said those famous words, "Can I speak to the manager, please?" A smile spread across my face as I replied, "I am the manager." Now, if you're enjoying the video and connecting with at least one of these stories so far, stick around and don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 6. Not my story, but one of my best friends. He did really well for himself at a young age. He's in the hotel business and he started as a night receptionist while he was in college. He worked his way up to become a food and beverage manager, then an assistant general manager, and eventually the general manager of one hotel, then 2 hotels. After that, he joined the board of directors of a mid-sized hotel chain. Part of his job was dealing with customer complaints when they were serious enough. Because the chain wasn't that big, he also had to be the general manager of a smaller hotel, which he used as his office. One day, he was planning to go home around 5 p.m. when he found out that the night receptionist was sick and wouldn't be able to come in. The day receptionist was also leaving for a 2-week vacation after his shift ended. Since the night receptionist has special duties, not just anyone can do the job and they couldn't find a replacement. So my friend, who was on the board of directors, agreed to do it for one night with a plan to figure something out for the following days. He was only 32 or 33 at the time and looked quite young for his age. That evening, someone came in for a late check-in. The hotel was fully booked because of a nearby conference. The late arrival didn't have a reservation, but he was absolutely sure he did. My friend checked the system and saw that the person did have a reservation, but it was for the next day and night. It had been booked online just 5 minutes ago. My friend explained that the person could check in the next day, but there was nothing he could do that evening. He tried to offer other options nearby, but the guy wasn't happy and blamed my friend, saying he had a reservation and should get a room and that it wasn't his fault the hotel was overbooked. As these things often go, the guy asked to speak to the manager. My friend, who can be quite sharp when he's had enough, played the old trick of saying he would get the duty manager. He walked through a door, turned around, and walked back into the reception and shook the guest's hand, pretending to be the duty manager. The guy got even angrier and demanded to speak to the real manager. My friend showed him the board with his name as the general manager and asked if he should get the general manager. The guy said, "He better do that." My friend repeated his trick with the door and came back, pointing to his name tag and explaining that he was the GM of the hotel. The guy stormed out, shouting that he would be writing a complaint. This kind of thing had happened before, and usually it just ended there, but this guy actually wrote a complaint and started it by demanding that it be sent to higher management immediately, not handled by the GM of the hotel. The complaint ended up on the desk of the sales director of the chain, who was, of course, my friend. He wrote back a nice reply, explaining that the hotel was fully booked and that the guest had mistakenly chosen the wrong date, even though it was no mistake, just someone hoping to get a room by causing a fuss. The hotel was very sorry, and my friend even offered a 10% discount on the next booking. It was all signed receptionist, duty manager, general manager, and director of sales. Story 7. I used to work at an ice cream shop, and one night when we didn't have enough staff, I was helping to scoop ice cream for customers. There were two women who seemed a bit distant, and I tried my best to make small talk and be friendly, but it was kind of awkward. I had this big customer service smile on my face, and I knew I might have been a bit too much, but I wanted to keep the mood up for my team. After I gave them their ice cream scoops and they went to the register to pay, I was called to the back of the shop to help with a question from my team. As soon as I got to the back, the person at the register said, "There's someone who wants to talk to you." Knowing we were short-staffed, I took a deep breath, thinking it was going to be someone complaining about the wait or something like that. I walked out to the front, and it was the two women I had just served. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, this can't be good. They looked at me and asked, "You're the manager?" I put on my biggest customer service smile and said, "Yes, I'm sorry. Is there something I can help you with?" To my surprise, they said, "Oh, well, this might sound silly, but we really wanted to praise you for being so cheerful and friendly. When we were waiting in line, we saw how nice you were to everyone, so thanks." It was super awkward, and I laughed and I thanked them, and I just stood there awkwardly giggling and smiling because I didn't know what else to do until they walked away. After they left, I went back to the kitchen and did dishes or something because I couldn't handle talking to people for more than 10 minutes. It was a real roller coaster of emotions. Story 8. I used to be the manager of a bakery that had grown from one location to three. One day, a customer came into the shop with a coupon for 50% off on some pastries. I told her we couldn't accept it because we hadn't given out any coupons. She said she got the coupon from our new location, and since we were the same company, we should accept it. Even though she insisted, I still said no because we hadn't issued any coupons. Then she asked to speak to the manager. I smiled and told her she was already talking to him. She went on a rant for a few minutes, saying we would hear from her lawyers over about $10 worth of pastries before she stormed out. The next day, when the owner of the bakery chain came by, I told her what happened and showed her the coupon. She pointed out that the customer had spelled the name of the bakery wrong and had put an expiration date that had already passed. So I could have refused the coupon for those reasons too, but she thought the whole thing was so funny, she put the coupon in a frame, and as far as I know, it's still hanging on the wall of the break room. The owner could have also hung the coupon outside, that way every time that lady passes by, she's going to see how foolish she was. Story 9. I used to work at an arena where my mother was the head chef and I was in charge of the concession stand. All the employees knew me as my mother's kid and they treated me with respect even though I never asked for it. They did this because they really admired and cared for her like a mother. And we got a new employee who started taking some of my mother's shifts. From the beginning, he tried to boss me around. I turned to him and said, "No, I think you'll be better off working the fryers tonight, thanks." And then went back to what I was doing. He started yelling, saying I couldn't tell him what to do and that he would get me fired. I calmly replied, "I don't think I can fire myself." And that's when he realized I was his boss. The look on his face as he slowly understood that I was second in command was something I'll never forget. After that, he stayed away from me as much as possible. I never treat anyone badly without a good reason, but I could tell from his training shift that he was a real pain. Unfortunately, he ended up getting fired because he was caught looking at pictures on his Instagram during work hours. Story 10. From 2013 to 15, I managed 3 gas stations for a small family business in a college town. One of the gas stations was my main store where I worked my regular shifts. But I also visited the other 2 stores 3 or 4 times a week to check on our inventory and talk to the employees who opened those stores. Because of my schedule, I was only at any of the stores between 5:45 a.m. and 2 p.m., so there were a lot of regular customers who never saw me at all. One day, I was working the second shift at one of the other stores, which was unusual for me. A woman came in, put a drink on the counter, and swiped her card before I even had a chance to scan the beer. I asked to see her ID, and she gave me some DUI court papers that said her license was revoked until a certain date. I told her I needed to see a state issued photo ID because, for all I knew, she couldn't be allowed to make the purchase. This made her upset, and she started complaining, saying things like, "I'm obviously allowed, and you can't tell me I don't." And, "The girl who usually works this shift sells me a 12-pack every day with these papers." And my favorite, "You must be new, so I bet you just don't know how things are done around here. I know the manager. Why don't you call them and have them tell you how it's done?" After letting her complain for a bit, I calmly explained that I couldn't sell her the item without a proper ID, and I suggested she could go to the Highway Patrol headquarters, which was only 5 miles away, to get a state-issued photo ID. She asked for the manager's phone number so she could call them. Just to see what would happen, I showed her the store manager's after-hours contact number on our contact sheet. She called it. Of course, my cell phone rang and I took it out of my pocket and answered it just for dramatic effect. The look on her face when she realized I was the manager was absolutely priceless. Story 11. I worked as a groundskeeper for a large complex with around 500 tenants. The manager was always busy with move-ins, move-outs, collecting rent, and dealing with all sorts of issues. So when it was time to open the swimming pool for the summer, she gave me the authority to remove people from the pool area if they were causing trouble. I tried to be easygoing with the rules because I had a lot of work to do and couldn't watch everyone all the time to make sure they were following the pool rules. But there was one important rule: no drinks, especially in glass containers, were allowed near the pool. I was the one who had to sweep the entire pool deck every day, making sure there wasn't even the tiniest piece of glass so that no one would get hurt. There was this one resident, known for causing trouble, sitting by the pool with a big bottle, drinking straight from it like she was on a street corner. She even raised the bottle to me as if toasting, as if I would be okay with her breaking the rules with kids around. I told her she had to take the bottle away from the pool area or she would be banned for life. She responded with a rude comment, saying I wasn't the boss and that I was just a janitor. Then she finished the bottle and threw it. It hit the fence in front of me and broke into pieces on the deck. She laughed as she left, telling me to clean it up. I had to close the pool for 20 minutes on a hot July day to make sure every little piece of glass was swept up. Later, when I told my boss about what happened, it was a real pleasure to put an eviction notice in that person's mailbox. Alright, if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for watching with me on this one.